So you found about every 15 minutes I'll take a break, and you can sometimes I'll talk a little bit faster, and if you feel like you need to take a break or you need to rewatch the video, feel free. We talk about the false memory syndrome, right? So once you convince the younger sibling this become their memory, they got lost in the mall, it really become their memory. And even though it's false, and they believe it happens. And the reason is you have to explain this by looking at what happened in the brain, and that's biological psychology. So we use the biological events to explain what happened in the behavior. And those false memory syndrome can be very bad. This lady, she wrote a book about my line. She actually have the false memory syndrome. She thought her dad sexually molested her, and she accused her dad, actually sent her dad to the prison, and because of the false memory. So if you are interested, you can watch this video. I'll provide a link here. Let's look at another pretty big topic in biopsychology. It's called psychophysics. And Fincher is the father of psychophysics. So what's psychophysics? We all know physics, right? Those outside physical stimulus. Psychophysics is they study the relationship between the outside and the inside. Like the light, okay? How bright the light is. That's how you feel. So psychophysics is the outside, the real physical stimulus with the inside, the relationship. That's psychophysics. And in the psychophysics, Fincher, he's the father of psychophysics. Actually, he used himself to do experiment, and he got serious depression for several years. Yeah, those smart people, they're not always the happy people, right? And in the psychophysics, they like to show you, okay, if a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear, does it make a sound? And before you're in this field, before you take this class, you say, of course, it makes a sound, right? What kind of question it is. But in the psychophysics, they say, what creates the sound? It's not just the air particle movement. Your air particle movement need to be transferred into the eardrum movement, and will be transferred into your hair cells. There's the hair cells in your inner ear movement. And eventually they release neurotransmitter, they generate electrical signal, and they create the action potential. We'll talk about this part, and send the action potential to the brain. And when your brain, your neuron get activated, that's when you hear. And because of this, your sound is a perception part. And if no one is around to hear the sound, perception does not exist, so you hear nothing. So this is their argument. And in the psychophysics, they believe everything happens in your brain. You use your brain to hear, you use your brain to see. I'll give you one example. You use your brain to see. And you say, what's this? It's difficult to tell, right? Until I block this. And suddenly you realize, oh, there's a bee. But this picture is exactly the same as this one. And you say, why you have difficulty to identify this word, but not this? And the reason is your brain. Your brain are so used to see. That's strange. Your brain see, yes. You use your brain to see. Your brain are so used to see one object being blocked by something else. When you look around, pretty much every object is being blocked by something else. So turn out, if the object is being blocked by something else, your brain automatically connect this line together. So you are able to recognize this is letter B. So this is an example to tell you, you use your brain to see, you don't use your eye to see. And if you only use your eye to see, this should look exactly the same like this. But they are very different, and that's your brain. And your brain usually do a very good job. Sometimes they make a mistake. We'll talk about this in the perception field. Like your brain gonna use a lot of cues help you to identify what's the length, the real distance of these two. And we know these two, they are the same, right? But now they start to change. even though they're supposed to be the same. This one looks longer than this one. And the reason is, well, this line cover 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, cover 6 lines, and this one only cover 4. So the background play a big role. So your brain thinks this one covers 6 lines, so this must be longer compared with this one. So even though they're the same, and you know they're the same, but your brain still believes this one's supposed to be longer, so this one gonna look a little bit longer than this one. And that's your perception. That's what happens in your brain, psychophysics. And there's another one we're gonna talk about in the perception field. Why this lady is smaller than this gentleman? And because she's in the way back. She's in the way back. The truth is this. So sometimes make a mistake, and the movie The Lord of the Ring, if you watch the movie, you know the hobbies are smaller, right? And Gandalf is bigger. And the director, the Peter Jackson, very smart people, he just used this trick. When they play the Gandalf and Hobby talk together, actually the Hobby is actually in the back and Gandalf is in the front. And on the screen it look like they were talking together, but actually they're this. So the perception field, it creates a little bit of mistake, but it's still a very good system. And this psychophysics, they study how the physical world correlated with the your perception. And these are in the 16th century. The artists use the fruit. These are the fruit, and I believe you see face. We'll talk about this. In human, we are very sensitive to face. We are very sensitive to face. Anything look like a face, you will believe it's a face. And because the facial expression gives us a lot of information, you can tell the person is angry, is happy, or may threaten your life-threatening. And we can look at the face. So the human's brain is actually very sensitive to the face. And if you give them something that look like a face, and your brain's face neuron get activated, they will look like a face. So you can make something look like a face. And the scientists use this to explain why people think they see ghosts. Because every time you see ghosts, it's in the dark environment, in the not a lot of light, and you feel like you see something look like a face, right? And you know it's not a human, so what's this? It must be a ghost. That's why people see ghosts. And you know the scientists don't believe in ghosts, so they use this to explain, okay, it's all your brain. Your brain are very sensitive to face. And the sensory field, okay, what's the sensory system's job? You have the receptor pick up the outside stimulus. These are the physical stimulus. And eventually they're gonna have the sensory neuron, like from your eye, from your ear, from your skin. They're gonna transfer them into your control center. This is your brain. You found this very similar to the circuitry for your control, like your room temperature. Right? You have a receptor pick up the temperature and go to the thermostat on the wall. Very similar. And this time it's just go to your brain. And the thermostat is going to send signal to the outside. We call it effector. Effector is the big compressor, big fan outside of your apartment that will operate and lower your body temperature. But this time is your brain going to send a signal to the muscle or the endocrine gland and ask them to work to respond. To respond to the danger, response to the outside environment. And this part is the sensory field. This part is sensory field. And your perception is all created in here. So you have the sensory cortical areas responsible for it. And that's why the sensory scientist or the psychologist in the sensory field, they like to show you think your physical world you experience is nothing but the illusion your brain create. Because after the light hit the retina, and the retina gonna turn the light into the neuronal signal, and everything after that is a neuronal signal. And all your brain is well protected in the cranium, and it's actually very dark inside. There's no light. So all your brain have is neuronal signal. And they use those neuronal signal to recreate the field you think you know. Sounds creepy, but that's what they believe. And in the psychophysics, well, we spend a lot of time talking about psychophysics. That's an important field in biological psychology as well. So they study the relationship between the physical world and psychological. That's how you feel, and that's the outside physical stimulus. Bill Geisler, he's the professor in the psychology at UT Austin, because I come from UT Austin. He studied the visual field, so this is his lab, pretty cool lab, and he studied the visual perception. So we do have psychologists, we actually have a lot of biological psychologists, and they use animals, sometimes they use animals, sometimes they use human to study they use those biological events to explain how the behavior change or your perception. So that's biological psychology. And in the whole semester, we're going to spend time talk about different fields of biological psychology. We're going to use the biological approach to restudy psychology. Okay, that's it.